just give a general description of who LVEJO is. So LVEJO, the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization, has been in La Abierta, or Little Village, for about 20 years now, doing various campaigns. We were able to shut down the two coal power plants in 2012. We were also able to get a brand new park, La Abierta Park, after a 15-year fight to get this space. La Abierta has about 100,000 people. It's a very dense community. It's also a very young community. And our neighborhood is separated by two rival gangs. And the east side of the neighborhood had green space. They have Petrosky Park, which is 23 acres, but that park wasn't necessarily accessible to other people in the neighborhood, especially young people who, for different reasons, didn't feel safe to travel and use a park. So we were able to get La Abierta Park, and that's still an ongoing thing. They gave us a park. And when they first started drafting like the plan of it, the park district was like, cool, y'all want a park? Let me give you 8 soccer fields, because that's what you all would want. We took it back. We're like, no, we want basketball courts. We want skate. There's a big skating community. We also have a lot of young children. There's actually 5,000 children under the age of 5 within a quarter mile of this brand new park. So we were able to take it back to the community, and our skate park was actually designed by youth from Petrosky Park. So it's all very community-based park. And a few ongoing campaigns that we have right now are our diesel and clean air campaign, our brownfield redevelopment. So looking at how can we transform these brownfields into a transformative space for community members to come and use. We have our collateral channel campaign, which is a body of water that comes off of the sanitation ship canal, and it's very contaminated. People call it Ass Creek because it releases methane and it causes this very really bad foul smell. And our park campaign, we got the park, but we're also fighting for a community center, which we don't have one, and that's on that side of the neighborhood. Petrosky has one, but again, it's not accessible. So we're gonna move on from coal to diesel. So we were able to shut down the coal power plant in 2012 with the help of many community leaders, organizations, and allies. And it was a 12-year struggle. People were getting impacted by this coal power plant, which is located on Pulaski and 31st. And this Crawford Coal power plant was responsible for 75% of particulate matter in Little Village's atmosphere. So a lot of not healthy, clean air. And, you know, people knew that their symptoms weren't coming genetically, like they were getting it from the source. But like many things, we needed proof. So we partnered up with the Harvard School of Law of Public Health, and they made they studied, and they were able to let us know that because of the coal power plant, it caused 40 premature deaths, 550 emergency room visits, and 2,800 asthma attacks every year due to the toxic pollutants that the power plant was letting out. And a lot of people didn't necessarily know it was there. I mean, it was there, and you could see, we would call it white clouds, or the cloud factory, because you just see them like all the time. But one thing to know is that this coal power plant didn't generate any electricity for Little Village or Chicago or Illinois. It was being sold off to the East Coast, so New York, Vermont, places like that, whoever paid the most for it. It also didn't employ anyone from the community. And LVEJO, along with many partners, conducted a lot of nonviolent direct actions. So one of them was we were at City Hall with 40 people with black plastic bags to represent the 40 premature deaths every year and stuff like that. And I just want to show you all this map of La Abierta. 38% of all land in Little Village does belong to industrial or manufacturing district, which is all the purple you see. So we closed it down, and then we started seeing all these diesel trucks. And we were like, well, why are they here? Why is there a lot of traffic? 1/3 of all U.S. goods pass through Chicago. They don't necessarily stay here. They get shipped elsewhere, but they do pass through here. LVEJO, as you can see on the map, is right off of I-55, so it makes us a very accessible community. It has a very active industrial corridor. There's a lot of brownfields that are just ready for anyone to come and buy them and construct whatever they want. And it's also adjacent to the sanitary and ship canal. So we started asking questions like, why are they here? How many drugs do we get in our neighborhood? What is our air quality like? And we started asking these questions after the Unilever expanded in our neighborhood. That's how our campaign started. So Unilever has been in our neighborhood for about 100 years. They make Hellmann's mayonnaise, and they recently just expanded right next to an elementary school, Zapata Elementary, with about 1,000 children from K through 8th. And they operate with trucks. So we wanted to understand how many trucks were passing through our neighborhood. So we took it upon ourselves and community to get that data. So we partnered up with the local high school where they did truck counting on Crawford and 31st for a semester. And they estimated that there was about 1.47 trucks every minute just on that intersection alone. So we were also able to partner up to get a grant to do air quality monitoring. And out of that, we were able, with the data that we gathered, Pulaski and 31st, which is a very busy industrial traffic road, the air quality there already surpasses the regulated PM 2.5 that is allowed by the US EPA. So we already know that there's a lot of trucks in our neighborhood, that the air quality is probably not the best. Yes. So with the expansion of Unilever, they expanded. Their project is done now. But they also donated 3 acres of their land to Zapata to expand because most of our schools are overpopulated. There's a lot of children. So they donated 3 acres of land to expand. And our demands is that because they are so legit right next to the school, that we should hold this company accountable and have them either pay, sponsor, or just get some type of get the right air filtration system so that the kids in the school aren't breathing in the particulate matter. I mean, kids are in school 8 hours out of the week, 5 days a week. It's not a lot of healthy air to breathe in. So you want to hold them accountable. And, I think that companies, we should dialogue with them. We can get to a point, but they should be good neighbors, especially if you're right next to a school. So just to paint a picture, this is a diagram of a strand of hair, and we compare it to a grain of sand. The blue is PM10, which is like dust in Poland, and then the smallest one is PM 2.5, and it's tiny, tiny. The tinier it is, the worse it is, because the deeper it can get into your respiratory illness, into your blood stream. And health effects that it causes, it targets pregnant women, people who have heart disease or lung cancer, diabetes, people who are very active, who spend a lot of time outdoors, seniors, children, and infants. And the side effects are asthma, premature birth, infant mortality, heart disease, respiratory illnesses, lung cancer, and premature death. So while I just started, I haven't started. I have been doing this for a while now, but I always ask my question, like, why is it that the school was able to be built right next to industry, or why is industry right next to this school? Well, our industrial corridor hasn't been updated in more than 25 years, and there's a lot you can do because there aren't a lot of restraints. So that's why the school is actually built on an industrial site. And the first time it was built without no remediation of the land. So they had to take it down and reconstruct it to clean up the site. But it was able to happen because there had been no regulations, no updates on the industrial corridor. It's also good to note that in certain industrial corridors, the zoning doesn't allow for green space to be built because of the contamination and the location that they're at. And I'll pass it along to Lip.
Thank you, Nancy. So anybody in this room have asthma? Anybody have family members that have asthma? Know somebody that has asthma? I think by the time we get to know somebody that has asthma, right, like it's the majority of the room. And asthma is one of those things that you can inherit from your parents, right? But it's also something that could be environmentally triggered. And as Nancy, mentioned, with this particulate matter 2.5, it's really, really small. And it can really trigger a lot of health issues. How about trucks in your neighborhood? She said that there was about 1.4 trucks passing at one intersection every minute. Do you all see lots of like those big trucks with the big exhausts ever coming out, but like rolling down the street by your house? Right, so this is something that we're experiencing already, as Nancy mentioned. The site that you see in the background, that's what's left of that coal power plant that was emitting carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, NOx, nitrogen oxide, and a host of different pollutants, right? The fight to shut down those coal plants, was initiated for a love of our community members and knowing that we deserve better, right? And knowing that that coal plant was there a long time before Little Village was even Abierta. And so thinking back to the NOT activity, right, where that first time around, there was really no understanding of what you were doing and the impacts it was going to have. But after we know the impacts it's going to have, it's kind of our responsibility to do better, right? And so this is where we're at also with the Hilco site. We're calling it the Hilco site. We really don't want to relinquish it like that. But it is this company that's been around for about 30 years. And this is what they do. They take old, like, environmental burdens, according to their site, and they revamp them into a place that brings back it's economically booming. And they've actually, when you go on their website, you'll see language that we use in the environmental justice movement. They talk about, they want to make sure that everywhere you work and go to school and the places you recreate are healthy and in short distance from one another. And they've done other projects across the country. So in February, I think it was like, gosh, sorry y'all, I have 2 toddlers. Sometimes I don't get a lot of sleep. I got more sleep than I needed yesterday, so my brain was like, what happened? In February 7th, there we go, it's on here. So on February 7th, they made a public announcement that they had bought off the 70-acre site. 70 acres, how many of y'all know how much an acre is? Any football fans? An acre is just a little bit bigger than a football field, right? Urban planner? Okay. So this is 70 football fields. That's how big this site is, right? This company bought it from the city and they bought it from the company that had it in its possession, which was Midwest Energy. And so their plan is that in 14 to 24 months, they're going to have it cleaned up, right? Which sounds good to us. And though their plan is also to have vertical development so that they can lease it to some other body. Some of the other people that they have leased to in other places like Baltimore, Boston, have been places or companies like Amazon, Under Armour, FedEx. And so for us, that means really low wage labor, right? Because we've been working with folks that organize warehouse workers, and they've told us about the conditions inside the warehouses, that a lot of times they outsource the employment to a third party. So it's temporary jobs. They're not even really like long-term jobs. We've also known that there's harassment inside those jobs. It's really bad work conditions, right? And then we also think of a lot more diesel trucks, because if it's going to service a warehouse, it's going to be a logistics facility, and that's something that they have publicly stated. We think trucks. And we've heard them, we've been in meetings with them where they're just like, this is the new economy. And those are terms that we use also in our movement. But when we talk about a new economy, we're talking about an economy that's regenerative, an economy that's moving from an extractive capitalist that's exploiting people to something that's regenerative, where people are reclaiming their labor, and we're moving away from the extractive industries, right, that exploit our land, that exploit our people. And they're also talking a lot about this. The new economy for them is e-commerce, right? They're like, people, how many of y'all order from Amazon, or your parents order from Amazon, right? It's amazing. As a mom, sometimes I'm like, I'm out of diapers. Can you all deliver some diapers for me, right? And we're also learning about all of the complications in having that, right? That it brings a lot of problems. So they are promising, the aldermen, that there's going to be more jobs. And what we're asking for is that there are environmental and health requirements in their planning of what's going to come, and that they really consider who's going to be leasing. And so we've met with them a couple of times. We have some of the demands that we've been asking them is more transparency and being involved in the process. So going back to the not activity, right? Where a whole group gave you a problem to undo. That's how we're feeling, right? That we're constantly putting out all these small fires, constantly trying to undo all these knots in our community that we've inherited, that we haven't been part of a planning process. And so we're demanding to be part of the process now. We want to be at the table with them when they're first starting these plans. And as Nancy mentioned, we have also learned about something that the city has going on called the Industrial Corridor Modernization Plan. And as she mentioned, it hasn't been updated in 25 years. And for us as a community that has been impacted by industry in a myriad of ways, right? Both like on the health front, but then we also recognize that a lot of our tios, our tias, our extended family might work in these industries, right? We're not asking for all of these plants to shut down and go somewhere else. And that's what I think that is a really important thing, that many people think that environmentalists are anti-jobs, that we're just like, no, we want to live back in the Stone Age where we're just like eating worms, No, we don't. We want to make sure that people are healthy in their workplaces. And so what we're calling for in this process of the Industrial Corridor Modernization Plan is that there are environmental and health impacts taken into consideration. We want all of these industries in our industrial corridor to clean up their act and to be required. Some of the industries have been there for so long and are so embedded in the city politics that they've averted paying fines. When we did have a Department of Health and Environment in the city, like a lot of companies have not paid those fines. And so what we're asking for is those things to be included in the Industrial Modernization Plan. We are working to educate ourselves and educate the community on that. Because we also have noticed that once communities get cleaned up environmentally, they also get cleaned up ethnically, right? And we can look at just the impacts of gentrification, even in Pilsen, right? We worked in hand in hand with them as they were also shuttering the Fisk coal plant, which was also having health impacts in the communities close to it. And so what we want is to make sure that our communities stay culturally rooted, that we don't have to have our neighbors, facing higher taxes because now the community has improved environmentally. We know comrades like extended movement family out on the West Coast that they cleaned up. I'll give you one example. They cleaned up a site, turned it into a park, and none of their families or members can play in that park because they were moved out. They were displaced out of that neighborhood, and that's in San Francisco. And we all have heard about all the things that are happening in San Francisco. So what we're doing right now is meeting with Hilco. We want to establish a strong relationship with them and make sure that they're following these demands, because they have been doing this for 30 years. You look at their FAQ, their frequently asked questions page on their website, and you can tell they have experience in working with communities, and I put that in quotes, right? They know that the questions we're going to ask, are they getting city money? They have that as a question. No, they're not going after any city money for this project. This is all coming out of their own corporate pot of money. They know that we're going to be asking about the jobs piece. We're going to be asking about the environmentals, and so they're pretty experienced in this. We're also reaching out to other communities like in Boston and in Baltimore that have had to deal with them to get a better sense, because as Nancy mentioned, we're not anti-industry. We know that we deserve better. Our communities deserve to live in a clean place. Our communities deserve to work in clean places. And so we want to make sure that these places are cleaned up, both internally, like workers are not being exposed to hazardous materials or bad conditions, and that our communities are also not going to be burdened with other health impacts. So we have a call.
Yeah. So I talked a little bit about our brownfield community. And this brownfield, which is now a beautiful garden, se me hace justicia, Ejército Justice, used to be an industrial site, and it used to be really contaminated. But community came together. There's not a lot of green space in our neighborhood. We are actually at 0.69 acres from the 2 acres per 1,000 people that the city of Chicago requires. So we aren't even halfway. But with this beautiful garden, we are trying to get children's programming. There's a lot of children in our neighborhood. My parents garden at that garden. My little brother is really involved, but we need funding for us at children's programming. And also we are also fundraising for a rooftop. We love being in this garden, but in the summer, when the sun is really intense, it's hard for us to work. So we need a place where there's shade, where people can just relax and chill and then go back to work. So we have this fundraiser at our LVEJO page. If y'all feel very moved to donate, that is one of our fundraisers. Yeah.
And we'll open it up to questions. Thank you all for coming. It was great to see a diversity in ages and a diversity in just people here. So thank you all for coming. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
Is there any more talk from Coco and Abierta on how many trucks they'll be bringing into the community?
They haven't released that because they keep saying, they're like, well, it depends on who we're leasing to, right? And, but, because they're saying like this new economy is about, don't just think about warehouses, think about offices and warehouses. It's just one spot. And they also talk about like the last mile economy. And we know Little Village, right, for those of you that are familiar with it, we're really close to 55. We're right off that highway. We're less than a mile from downtown, right? Less than a mile from a lot of major places. And so they're seeing this as a hot spot for them to be able to do that. And, the alderman, when we've met with him, he's like, breaking it down to us, right? And he's all like, so the guy from the city was throwing me off. Sorry, y'all. That's why I was like, but so we work with him. But sometimes I'm just like, I told him to when he came in. I was like, you're using our tactics, right? Like following us wherever we're at to make sure we're not. But the alderman was breaking it down. He's like, you have these big shipments of products that come in, and then they get broken down, right? Because each of you all order from Amazon, we all order from Amazon, and then they have to be repackaged and sent out. And he's like, this is a great location for it. And again, it's that carrot on the stick. They keep using the jobs. So Unilever, to answer your question directly, Unilever has not said how many trucks are going to come in. Hilco, sorry. Yes, Unilever is the other one that also is toying us around how many new trucks are coming in. Hilco hasn't said how many trucks are coming in because they don't know who the leasee is going to be, right? But they keep saying, like, they put in a lot of money into this, so they're looking to make a return, right? Like, this is how they're able to convince their investors to let them put down this money, because they got to put a whole business plan around it and say, like, you're gonna get your return on investment and some, right? Any other questions? You and then you.
Okay, so first of all, just wanted to commend you for the level of information that's being shared. I don't think if you Google and you look up, it would replicate what you're bringing to the public and the community. And also, this is like a wealth of, this is like a gold mine. It's reminding me of this organization called Center for Urban Pedagogy in New York City. And they keep an eye on everything that the city's doing and then translate it into human terms, so that like the rest of the city can understand, especially bilingual. Like, okay. But my question was, given that this is going to be a 70-acre development, and I don't know where that falls with the community benefits agreement that would end up happening with the city, but it just stayed in my mind how you guys mentioned you're looking for a community center earlier on in the conversation. It's like, how does that come to the table then with negotiations?
Absolutely. And I think, thank you for that. That's something I failed to say, is that like during the 12-year campaign of us closing down the plant, you have to also engage people on a vision, right? You can't always be the boogeyman being like, we're gonna all die if the coal plant stays, right? Like, you have to also like engage people so that they can dream, what can that site be, right? And so over those 12 years, people re-envision what that site can be. Now we're hosting more intentional conversations again about what that site can be. As Nancy mentioned, because of where it sits, right off of the highway, the industrial corridor, we don't want an open space where people can recreate. Even though we need more spaces, it's just not healthy. It's a huge environmental health risk to have our people out there playing tennis or doing whatever, right? So some of the ideas have been an indoor farm, right? Some like hydroponics type of things, a training center. Edith threw out an amazing idea at one of our last meetings, like an EJ museum to be part of that, right? We've also envisioned, a place that could be a community center. The community center also, we're trying to get as part of the new park. But that doesn't mean we only need one community center, right? So there's a lot of ideas already out there on what this site can be and what it can mean. And for us, we want it to be a catalyst for good, health, for, improving the environment, and for the economy, right? We're not anti-jobs. We know our people need to feed their families. We want really good work conditions for them. Do you want to?
Yeah, and I think it's also good to note that when we shut down the coal power plant, our executive director set on a task force for 5 years where they would come together as a community and figure out the future of this site. So when Hilco purchased the site, none of those people were let know. We were let know by our alderman, but the plan had already been made. So, those 5 years that people were coming together to envision this future with this giant site, just for that to be taken away was a huge hit for us. So that's why this project feels very personal, because again, this isn't a project that was proposed by the community. It was proposed by Hilco. So I think we're coming off as having conversations with Hilco, holding them accountable, and working with them to have healthy, good paying jobs. But at the end of the day, if the community doesn't want that, then how can we best advocate with Hilco that this project is not what the community wants, and how can we move forward from that?
And then you had a question?
Yeah, kind of similar, I think, but how do you, like in light of seeing when this has happened in other places, like you're saying, sort of the cleaning up environmentally leading to gentrification, how are you thinking like preventatively around how to, I don't know, think about that kind of
Absolutely.
aspect of it?
Well, that's why we're saying we don't want to be rezoned and not be an industrial corridor, right? Which is like, people are like, you want the industry to stay in the community? Yes, right? Because we're seeing that as an opportunity to really stay, like further anchor ourselves. It's hard in our communities because there's just so many, like we live at the intersection of so many like structural issues. To say that yes, we want industry in our communities, and we want it under these terms, right? We're really about a just transition, and that just transition involves people reclaiming their labor. And so some of the things we're looking at for these sites, not just for the Hilco or the Crawford site, but for other sites, is starting a cooperative commercial kitchen, right? Where we have the highest percentage of food vendors in our community. And so what does it look like to create a closed loop food system in our community, right? With the garden and with about 4 acres of farmland that were designed into La Villita Park during the design process. And then also thinking of indoor farming options, right? So that way food vendors can get their food locally. I mean, mangoes are going to be hard, but if we have an indoor greenhouse, we can get those mangoes and aguacates like all year round. And then also have, a kitchen where they can go, and then we're also to prepare their food. And then also we're in the process of developing a compost cooperative, right? And so those are also, again, ways that we're reclaiming our labor and making sure, when you're locked out of the economy, mainstream economy, you get really creative in ways that you can feed your family. And we also see cooperatives, worker-owned cooperatives, as a vehicle to keep people's self-determination, right? That they can still feed their families and have dignified jobs. And then the just transition also involves leading with vision, and that's coming from the people most impacted, and that's why we do the work that we do, going out to the community and asking them what they want to see. And it has to contest power, right? And so that's why we do a lot of the actions we do, and we're also creating, when we talk about contesting power, it's not just about woohoo, you gotta go, but it's also creating our own visions, because we can't wait around for others to do that for us, right? So to answer your question directly, it's educating people on also the TIFs and the impacts of that, making sure that homeowners have the information that they need, And then also being heavily involved in the industrial corridor modernization plan. Because the plan that they did come out, the Little Village, LVEJO and Pilsen plan, it looked like a for sale business plan for our community, right? It's like, and the cultural blah, blah. You know, they sell our communities like we're little cultural museums that you can come and eat our food, but like don't have to interact with us, right? Yes.
I think it's really interesting debate. You know, I think because I can see it from their point of view. You know, looking at I-55 and looking at Chicago as a transit hub, right? And
Yes.
so, I mean, a lot of those things, and of course the potential for, at least for their argument for saying we're bringing jobs. But I think going, you know, from an urban planning perspective, I think you know, this is one of the densest parts of the city, and that's one of the things that, I mean, when you look at the community area, right? And you mentioned 38% of the community area is dedicated to industrial use. So when you look at the population density of the community area, that dilutes the density a lot. So even at that number, it's higher than the city average. So when you actually get rid of those 2 census tracts that are along the river, the population density of Little Village is equivalent to New York City. Like, so think about that
wow.
for a second. Like Little Village has the same population density as New York City. So 27,000 people per square mile roughly. So I mean, you know, this is one of the most populous, most densest parts of the city. Why are we bringing in these hundreds of more, or potentially however many more semi trucks? So I mean, even aside from the, you know, the health impacts, which is so clear, like how do city leaders, how do you know, all the different politicians, how are they able to accept that as a viable plan? Like the impact and the health impact on this community is going to be immense, right? So as we know, so I mean, even just from the urban planning side, like, it doesn't make any sense to bring in this much more traffic into an area that's already so dense.
Thank you. I'm going to talk to you so we can write down that talking point. Any other questions? Yes. And
and by them using these areas that could potentially be used for community centers, for schools, playgrounds, it kind of like takes away these opportunities for children and adults and even teenagers. So you're just going off what we said, so it's a dense area that they could use the space.
absolutely. And I mean, you know, we, as Nancy mentioned, you know, the park was a fight that we were engaged in for a long time. Like, and it's across the street from Cook County Jail, right? Which is not like the best location for a park. And we just didn't have many options, right? And there hasn't been any violence at this park in the 5 years that it's been open because of a program that Nancy is leading, Mi Parque. Do you want to share about that?
Yeah, so just a little bit of history on the park. The park was also an industrial site, and it's elevated because, and this is beautiful, when people came together, they were like, oh, well, we can clean it up, and the community was like, you know, if you clean it up, you know, all this dirt was going to go on these trucks, and once they turned the corner, like, we didn't know where that was going to end up. So the community decided that if there was a possibility to keep the contamination there without it harming us, we wanted it there. So we worked with the US EPA. We were able to cap it, and it actually sits on 12 inches, 12. 12 feet of gravel, clay, sand, and cement. So the park is elevated, and I'm with the Park Advisory Council and with LVEJO, because our park is right next to Cook County Jail, and our community is already hyper-policed. There's from Homeland Security, ICE, the police department, and you know, all these policemen. We wanted to create a space where police weren't just coming up and harassing our people or making us feel uncomfortable. So we created this Mi Parque program, which is a youth-led, community-led program where we train people on restorative justice practices. So instead of, you know, if you see something, say something, and you call the police, we didn't want that culture in the park. So these young people and community members would be trained on how to interact when somebody was like smoking pot or drinking or doing something that they weren't supposed to. So having those conversations first before even calling the police. And we had, up until now, we haven't gotten to that place where we had to call the police because we are able to interact with young people and with community members. We kind of established that in the park. And one of the señoras that I work with, her name is Meche or Mercedes. She's on people. She's like the mom of the park. And she's one of the people who also runs the program. And whenever people see something and when they don't feel comfortable speaking up or saying something, they go up to her, and then we'll take over it. So then there's no need to call the police. So that's what Mi Parque is. We also help keep the park clean. Our park's budget is shares it with Petrosky Park, so we don't even have a full funded park, which is why we have to come out and do the cleaning, make sure that the bathrooms are open, that they're clean, that when things are broken at the playground, that we are pushing the park district to like fix them, and that's all the what Mi Parque does at the park. Yeah.
And then you had a question? Somebody over here. I saw your hand go up. Somebody in this area.
My question was answered.
Any other questions?
I have one more comment on kind of looking at the future with like the Metro trail, where you kind of say you don't want like an open space, but you have a city planning open space trail. So like, where you can push for people where you have areas where you can have like highway spans, but like you want to area going off of the logistics, but it's just gonna increase that check even higher.
Absolutely. And El Paseo, are you all familiar with like the 606 trail?
Yeah.
Right? So they're trying to do something like that, like connecting Pilsen to Little Village. And what our thing is like, we've seen the impacts of the 606 trail, right? Like it has been like the highway of gentrification. And I live right by the 606 trail, and I love to see brown and black young people blasting their music on their like fixies. I'm like, yes, reclaim this, this is yours, right? Because for a long time it was an abandoned rail line, right? And I mean, I used to go and hang out there when I was a teenager. Because the bad kids made me go there. But, just to see it like converted is beautiful, right? And it's also been a fast track to gentrification. And so we don't want that in our community. And also it's just not healthy. Anything south of 31st is putting people at a major environmental risk, because the thing that Nancy mentioned, the sanitary and ship canal contaminated, there's a lot of people that are like trying to promote all this like river water access activities, and we're like, not our people, don't be asking our people to go in that nasty water, like y'all can go ahead, become a mutant swamp person, So El Paseo is something that we're needing to engage in, because if it's gonna come, because a lot of times, right, like in going back to the NAT activity, we inherit these things and we have to deal with them in one way or another. So we're just trying to get in ahead of the game, make sure that we can define it, and define that these transition zones that they're calling, right, are going to be preserved as the housing in that area, like the taxes are, not going to go up and stuff like that. Edith?
I just wanted to add to what you were saying about the collateral channel where it's right next to the sanitary and ship canal, right? This is not the Chicago River, and a lot of plans have been masking it as it's part of the Chicago River. It's great. It's going to be another great open space for people that live there. This is our wastewater. This is where the Chicago has a combined sewer system. So whenever we have a lot of rain, that's where it ends up. So yeah. Our people in the community are not, I want to kayak in that area. They're not doing that. And it's interesting how these plants are selling this. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
So kind of going off that, you see like a correlation between the Great Rivers plan then by NPC and kind of like, this is part of
Yes.
like, this is just
Yes.
a step in towards that.
Yes, absolutely. And that's their, like, we're one of the catalyst sites. That's what they're calling it. And it's right off of the Crawford. Like, that's what they call it, the Crawford Catalyst Site and the Great Rivers Plan with MPC. And so we're really trying to make sure that we are engaging also in those conversations and that environment and health are taken seriously, right? Like, it's not just something that we're, you know, polar bears and hummingbirds. It's like, we want to see these areas converted, absolutely, but we also need them to be cleaned up, right? Like, for our benefit. Anything else? No? Yeah? You got a question?
I was just going to thank you so much for all the knowledge and information. Both of you are so powerful. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you.